A nation with weak strategic memory is always at the risk of repeating the mistakes of the past. The movie Sutluj has revived debates around a period when Khalistani terrorists had imposed their archaic and violent dictates on the state of Punjab, and secession seemed a distinct reality. Today, I am privileged to host Sri Ajai Sahni, Executive Director, Institute for Conflict Management and South Asia Terrorism Portal. He's also the editor of South Asia Intelligence Review. Sri Sahni has edited The Fragility of Order, Essays in Honor of Gill, and he has co-edited two books, Terror and Containment, Perspective on India's Internal Security, and The Global Threat of Terror, both along with Sri Gill. Welcome to Samvad, sir.
Thank you for having me.
So the movie Sutluj promotes a narrative of state terror, human rights violations, undocumented state killings, and more. And this is not the first movie which promotes a negative sketch of how terror was combated and contained in Punjab in the 1980s and 1990s. There was a very famous director who made a movie on similar lines. It was a very popular movie with very popular music. And yet I saw you on television yesterday, sir, where you were saying that you are happy that Sutluj has been made. What makes you say that?
Look, for the last certainly decade, since 2016, when violence in Punjab has been increasing, extremist manifestations in Punjab have been increasing, a diaspora-driven campaign has been ongoing. We have seen temperatures rising, but we have seen a one-sided propaganda with no response from the other side, other than a small number of people who may speak out from time to time. But it does not have the impact or the weight of an organized campaign that they were confronting. Now, what has happened with Sutluj is, because of the sheer and willful falsehoods that have been presented in this film, a lot of people have come out and started speaking. They are speaking of first of all, about the inaccuracies that are projected in the film, the falsehoods that are projected in the film, but also the omissions, the gross omission of the circumstances that prevailed in Punjab, of I think the portrayal of the principal protagonist as this pious, virtuous human rights activist. We did not have those concepts in those days, but in our current lexicon, Khalra would have been described as an overground worker of a terrorist organization or a terrorist associate. Now, all this, Khalra's entire background is whitewashed, and he is presented as this pious, very good, human being who is killed by absolute demons. The police is also a caricature. So I think this has provoked a reaction. That reaction is important because it has brought a lot of facts that you and I may know, but which most people have forgotten. True. And a younger generation is completely ignorant of. These facts have been brought out into the open. They have been brought out prominently, and a debate has started. And I think it is important to understand that the release of this film was mischievous, politically motivated. But the advantage over there also is that this debate will continue till the elections. And the general public is going to learn a great deal about those days, or relearn or revisit a great deal about those terrible days and what the Khalistanis, the atrocities that the Khalistanis committed in those days. And what kpsgill rescued Punjab from by defeating the Khalistanis. I think this is the unintended consequence of this film.
Sir, are these omissions which are generally brushed under the carpet of artistic liberty, work of fiction, that category? And do you think that these omissions are deliberate, or they just happen by mistake? Because there's some narrative which is floating around, which is captured by these people and then promoted. So, is this omission deliberate?
No, I think it is deliberate because it is too sustained, it is too one-sided.
Hmm.
Anyone who would approach the subject, you see, every film, when they do the script writing, there is a process of research. Now, I cannot believe that anyone who comes to Punjab to talk about even the Khalra killing and to talk about who was Khalra, what did he do, what was his background, what was the background of the violence within which all this occurred, what was the condition, what were the conditions
Hmm.
in the areas where the Taran Patti, Amritsar district, police district, Majitha,
Hmm.
what were the circumstances prevailing over there? You cannot make a film without knowing all this. You can't have a coherent script. It would be like situating Punjab in Mumbai. You
Hmm.
can't do that. So there will have been a research process. And any researcher who was going through this process would have been aware of this background, if not specific facts that we may want to emphasize. And that background has been intentionally suppressed. It cannot be the case that, oh no, we missed this.
So, I'll come to this Khalra bit, what he did, the figures he came up with. Like Khalistani elements, they have this narrative of a genocide which happened in Punjab during that period, and they quote figures of somewhere between 1 and 2.5 lakhs without obviously documenting for it, without any evidence in support of what they say. Jaswant Khalra, he arrived at a figure of 25,000 undocumented deaths, which itself is a very high number if you look at the numbers only. My question is, sir, what was the model and the methodology which led Khalra to this figure? Or it was just all hearsay sort of a thing?
First of all, let me go back to the figures you said. The Khalistanis float these ideas of 100,000 Sikhs were slaughtered. The same organization, the World Sikh Organization, in varying publications or submissions to the U.S. Congress or other agencies, says 50,000 Sikhs were slaughtered, says 100,000 Sikhs were slaughtered, says 250,000 Sikhs were slaughtered. The same organization making different representations before different bodies has given completely arbitrary figures with a variation between 50,000 and 250,000. So you can come to your conclusion about their credibility and their methodology. Now let's come to Khalra. Khalra says there were in these three crematoria 2,097 bodies that were disposed of by the police. He comes to the conclusion that all these were people who had been murdered by the police in false encounters or in deaths in custody by torture or by whatever other, that they were executed by the police. And this was suppressed. Now, first of all, if the police is to dispose of bodies that they have done mischief with, they are hardly going to put down details in registers. Okay? Including details of firewood utilized for disposal of bodies, etc. Now, you will understand that these three districts of Majitha, these are police districts within the Amritsar administrative districts.
Mm.
Taran, Majitha, and Amritsar police district. These were the worst affected districts as far as terrorism is concerned between the period that this person covers. First of all, understand this is not in 1 year. This is an 11-year period over which he has documented 2,097 bodies disposed by the police. That is all he has documented. That bodies were disposed by the police over an 11-year period. This was the worst affected period. dozens of bodies would be coming in which could not be identified. Migrants were being slaughtered by the terrorists. Terrorists were killing each other because there were multiple groups fighting each other for turf and for extortion and for whatever other benefits they were harvesting from the terrorist movement. Some people would also have been killed in perfectly legitimate encounters. After all, there were people on that side with guns killing people. So there must have been some engagement with policemen who had also carried guns. So there would be killed. Now, if you go to the NHRC decision on this case, they come to the conclusion that only 195 or 97, 195 of these cases were individuals who were in police custody at the time of death.
Mm-hmm.
Now we may jump immediately to the conclusion, oh, so at least 195 people were murdered by the police. That is also incorrect. If you go through the data of police custodial deaths across India, they occur all the time. People are taken in vulnerable conditions with prior injuries, prior illnesses. They fall in custody. There is violence in custody between prisoners, which may result in death. So just because 195 people are killed in custody, die in custody, does not mean that they were killed in custody by the police, by the custodian. Then they said something like 1,300 of these 2,097 cases were of individuals who could be identified. And they were given some compensation, both the people in who died in custody and the people. But the NHRC does not say these were 1,300 people who were killed by the police and surreptitiously disposed of. It says that the police did not follow the entire procedure that has been laid down, which means carrying out of postmortems, inquests, the full formal process. Now, I can assure you that if you went across the country, at least in North India, where, let us say, policing is not quite at the level standards that it might be in some of the southern states, you will find that bodies that are disposed of by the police are seldom taken through the entire process laid down by law. So you will find deficiencies everywhere. And in a situation of near war, not near war, of a civil war, you would definitely find deficiencies. The NHRC did not make any imputation as to criminal culpability. It did not say these 1,300 people have been killed, so inquiries should be carried out. All it said was the procedure laid down was not followed in the disposal of these bodies. Therefore, compensation is given to the families. As far as Khalra's figure of 2,097 is concerned, not to come to the 25,000 as yet, 2,097 is concerned, not a single case has a illegal death been proved. That I can say without qualification. Did illegal deaths occur? Were there false encounters? I cannot say. What I am saying is that the data that Khalra is presenting and the way it is being interpreted across not only the Khalistani sympathizers, but the so-called human rights groupings, is completely irreconcilable with what is known, what the reality is. Now you come to the 25,000 figure. So he takes this 2,097 figure and multiplies it with a number of other, or extrapolates it to other crematoria in Punjab and says, so 25,000 people were similarly illegally killed and cremated. Now this is when the primary figure is in question. This 25,000 makes no sense. Now I'll come to another thing. The disposal of unclaimed bodies is a basic function of the police. It is done everywhere. It was not something that the police started doing in Punjab. It is one of the duties of the police. If you take the data for Delhi, for instance, in 2011, more than 3,500 bodies were disposed of. In 2011, no high intensity war going on over here. In Punjab itself, in 2011, we had 1,004 bodies disposed of by the police. 2011, no violence going on, no mass violence going on, no terrorism going on. Now, so your basic average would be about 1,000 bodies disposed of in peacetime in Punjab per year. This data is no longer being aggregated by the NCRB after 2016. Data is only available to 2015. So roughly about 1,000 deaths, 1,000 bodies are were being disposed of by the police in peacetime in Punjab. So that brings you to a figure of 11,000 anyways in peacetime. Now take the situation in Punjab that prevailed between 1984 and 1994.
True.
Thousands and thousands of people were being killed, thousands per year. In the worst year, we had more than 5,000 fatalities.
True.
Not all these bodies could have been identified. The police would probably not have too much of an inclination to identify that act of negligence will certainly be there. There were other more pressing issues at hand, life and death issues, and a dead body is a dead body. Callous, indifferent, all that can be considered. But even this 25,000 figure, it has subsequently other human rights organizations have tried to validate it. They have never come above a figure of about 8,000. Now I'll tell you, these 3 police districts of Amritsar accounted for roughly 27% of total fatalities in those 84-94 period. Now, if you take that as a proportion of bodies that would be the remaining 73% would be something like 7,500 odd bodies. You can do the calculations. So it would be natural to expect something like 7,000 or 8,000 bodies to be disposed of by the police as unidentified.
True.
If the figure for these 3 districts is correct. So none of this is in the discourse. 1 or 2 people have tried to point out the actual situation, point out the processes and procedures, point out that the police disposes of unidentified bodies everywhere in this country and perhaps everywhere in the world. That even according to the NHRC's observations, some of the bodies bore bullet wounds. So none of this is reflected not only in Sutluj, but in the entire discourse on the subject. You know, there was a very good friend of mine who once said, there is a competition between human rights organizations that my genocide is bigger than your genocide. Because unless you have these inflated figures, nobody is going to attend to you. Unless you say 250,000 Sikhs were slaughtered, nobody is going to bother with what you are saying. So there is an inbuilt motivation to exaggerate fatalities, to use words like genocide and use words like, targeting of our community as a whole, efforts to wipe out a community. So this is language that is intended to and very successfully has been used to attract attention. And falsehood is at the core of these efforts.
Hmm. So listening to you now, even I am happy that Sutluj has been made because a parallel discourse with facts and figures is coming out. Otherwise, it was just not possible. Everything had been brushed aside and it was a one sided propaganda. I'll take you to one more figure, sir, a set of figures which I have borrowed from your article. It's an old article published in the Tribune, where you point out that 5,058 civilians and 973 security personnel were killed, along with 3,497 terrorists through 1991 when KPS Gill, because it's important to come to KPS Gill because of reasons we all know. When KPS Gill was not in Punjab, he was not DG Punjab, and
Yeah.
1566 civilians and 277 security personnel, along with 2,911 terrorists, were killed in 1992-93 after KPS Gill had resumed charge in Punjab. And the Khalistani movement was about to collapse because it was that period. Despite the greater loss of life when KPS Gill was not in charge, across categories, it's across categories, when he was not in charge, greater fatalities, KPS Gill continues to be demonized. And there are words, I mean, which I really don't understand as to why those words are used about him. He continues to be demonized. Why is it so?
He has to be demonized. He must be demonized. He is the one who defeated them. The other DGs were ineffectual. When 5,000 people are killed in 1 year, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to these people. They don't care whether civilians are killed, whether Sikhs are killed, whether Hindus are. It doesn't matter. Security for whether their own cadres are killed. They don't care about life. They care about the myth. And the myth collapses because of KPS Gill. He robs them of their manhood. He robbed them of their purpose. He destroyed their movement. That is what they do not forgive. Not that people were killed. Killing people for the Khalistanis didn't matter at all. They killed in cold blood. They killed at random. They killed without reason. 65% of the people they killed were Sikhs. 65% of the people they killed were Sikhs. They said, we are fighting for Sikh rights. So, at the end of it all, KPS Gill is the man who destroyed the movement, who defeated the Khalistanis, and he cannot be forgiven for that. Not because so many people died when he was in charge and so many people died when others were in charge. That is irrelevant. How many people die for mass murderers of this ilk?
Mhm.
For the Khalistanis, how many people die just doesn't matter. That is not part of the calculus. That is not why KPS Gill is demonized. He is demonized because he defeated them.
Mm. Sir, there is also an interim period which I would like you to take you to, which is a period when he finishes his first tenure as DGP Punjab, and then he shifted to DG CRPF before being brought back again. I believe there is a story behind this shifting, and there was something going on in the minds of the wise people sitting in Delhi. What was that story?
The wise people sitting in Delhi were at that point of time first VP Singh and then Chandrasekhar. Neither of them knew what was going on in Punjab. They thought they could appease the Khalistanis. So first of all, VP Singh started curbing police operations. Then Chandrasekhar came in. Their wisdom is manifest in the kind of governments they ran. So you can understand the wisdom they brought to running the Indian government was the wisdom that they took into their management of Punjab, which is not particularly great wisdom. Then Chandrasekhar came. He wanted to open a dialogue with the Khalistanis. The first conditionality that the Khalistanis put in was get rid of KPS Gill, get him out of Punjab. Explicit, get him out of it. And
And
he
we
agrees.
agreed. And we agreed.
He agreed. He agreed. He said, all right, he's gone. Now come and talk to me. So then they started talking. Fatalities went up from 3,000 to something like 5,500. 4,000 to more than 5,000. It was a complete, it was the incomprehension of these political leaders, of the nature of the Khalistani movement, of the Khalistani terrorism, that led to this decision to withdraw kpsgill from there. They thought, you see, everyone ties into this kind of logic that no, police oppression is the cause of terrorism. And then they say police oppression is what defeated terrorism. Figure it out. If police oppression is going to create a reaction which will never allow terrorism to end, how is it that police oppression is now the reason why terrorism ended? The reality is the use of force is a necessary function, even within democracies. If the police is brought into a situation where they are dealing with a heavily armed and trained terrorist movement, people are going to get killed. There is going to be violence. And that violence is there for the protection of the state and the endurance or restoration of the institutions of the state. If this is discriminate violence, clearly targeted violence, which separates the civilian, in most cases, I will never try to say there were no aberrations. Hundreds of policemen were punished by the police leadership for exceeding their brief or for using their powers for personal enrichment or for doing other illegal things. Hundreds of policemen were dismissed. But the principal policy or strategy that was pursued was a very clear distinction between the civilian and the terrorist. The terrorist was to be targeted and the civilian was to be protected. And that is why there was this book, I think, Terrorism Punjab, the Grassroots Reality, by 3 professors from the Guru Nanak Dev University, based on interviews of terrorists, ex-terrorists, which said after 1994-95, the movement disappeared without a trace. They could not understand how or why. If it had so much of a groundswell of support, no movement which is a popular movement can disappear so completely by sheer repression. It means that the people did not want them. The people rejected the Khalistanis because of their atrocities, because of the terrible things they would do. They would go into a house, first demand food, which is all right. All insurgent groups do that. They demand food, they would demand other support elements. Then they would send the menfolk of that house out, either into the ahata, the compound outside, or onto the roofs, and they would rape the women. This is not one case, this is not 3 cases. This was a daily occurrence across the villages of Punjab. A daily occurrence. There are doctors who have stated on record that the rates of abortion in Punjab villages went up dramatically, multiplied during this period because of the rapes by the Khalistanis. This book, The Grassroots Reality, records that more than 2/3 of the boys that they had interviewed, the Khalistanis that they interviewed, said they had joined the movement Shaukiya. You understand the word?
Yes, sir.
Badam shadam milde ne. We get good meva, good food, good dry fruits. We get a gun. Shaukiya, for the fun of it. That is what these people were doing. There are records that say that the average terrorist would enjoy 50 to 60 women during their very brief lifespan as active terrorists. These are the realities that need to be confronted. And yes, there were likely a significant number of police atrocities. Dozens of policemen have been jailed. As I said, hundreds of policemen were acted against by the police leadership itself. But you cannot, oh, these are freedom fighters. These were not freedom fighters. They were terrorists, and they were the worst kind of terrorists. Because they were not fighting for an ideology or a principle. They were fighting for the fun of it. They were fighting for the women they would get. They were fighting for the good life. They were fighting for extortion. They were fighting to build their, what were palatial White Houses. They were fighting so that their families could run fiefdoms in their villages. I'm very glad Sutluj has come.
Sir. True, sir.
It has brought out, or at least created the opportunity for others to speak. And I do hope that the victims of the terrorists will also come and join this discourse.
Sir.
You had families where entire families were wiped out. In one case, they went in, the menfolk ran away, and they murdered 10 women and children in the house. Every woman and child who remained in the house was murdered. This is one case I remember. And from infant to 80-year-old grandmother. This should be brought out. Let us recall all of the Punjab, those dark years of Punjab. Because it must be a warning to us that you make films like this to glorify terrorists and glorify the front organizations of terrorists. But there is another reality, and that reality should be a warning that we should not fall for this kind of propaganda, lest it recreates the same conditions once again. We are moving towards that slowly, very, very gradually. Between 2008 and 2015, there was not even a single Khalistan-linked killing in Punjab. From 2016 to 2026, there have been multiple killings every year. You will be hearing regularly news of bombs being thrown here. Most of this is being done by people outside.
See a lot of radicalization also, sir. A lot of radicalization. And people who were moderate, general people like you and me, have suddenly turned radical.
Look, this is, you must, why did Khalistani terrorism start? It was because of the politicians, all right? Delhi mishandles Punjab. Political leaderships in Punjab start projecting a radicalized message. If you keep saying Khalistan, Khalistan everywhere, some people are going to listen. If you completely destroy the edifice of, say, the Panthic institutions, which is what has happened now, the only way to regain control of those Panthic institutions becomes to adopt a more and more radical stance. The point is not that the people are somehow becoming more radicalized. The point is that the politics is becoming more and more radicalized for petty partisan electoral gain. This film was released opportunistically in the run-up to the elections, at a time when the Z5 platform had its largest, it's a very marginal platform, nobody goes to it. But because it was hosting the World Cup football, it had a relatively higher viewership. Despite that, I don't think a very large number of people saw it in those 2 odd days when it was being shown over there. It is when it is banned that suddenly it explodes into this. So this is all mischief. Then it is banned, and immediately the Akali Dal takes it up as a campaign across Punjab, going from village to village, showing the film in gurdwaras. Is this all accidental? Did it just happen on its own? Then why are you blaming the people?
So we need to keep national security out of politics, but it has become so ingrained that it's becoming virtually impossible to separate the two. And I think we'll have to conclude on that. Thank you so much, sir.